Hello and welcome to today's video. This is my October wrap up. We are wrapping up all the books I read in October. I've got a lot of them here, but a lot of ebooks that I read this month. I don't have the most meta statistics to give you this month. I haven't been very organised, so we're just going to talk about them. And also a lot of the books I've read this month have been in video, so I probably won't say much about those. I'll just link you up above to the video. So in October I read a total of 17 books, which is a really good reading month for me. That's kind of, I would say, above average. If it's not above average, it's definitely on the upper end. Like 17 is a really solid month. I'm really happy with that. And those 17 books equated to 6,753 pages. No matter how I read the book, I just took the page count from Goodreads. So even if I read it audio, I just take the page count. Like, yeah, that's how we do it. And I think that's all of the information that I have. We range from 2.5 stars all the way up to 5 stars, and yeah, there's a decent range there of books. None that were really dreadful, but there are definitely quite a few that I just didn't personally have a good time with. So that's kind of what we're looking at for now. I think we should just get into the ratings, the reviews. Overall, it's been a good reading month, but as you'll see, we had a good chunk in the middle where we just couldn't get high ratings. So we're going to start out strong, we're going to end strong, but in the middle it wasn't the best. So first of all, I read The Bone Library. This is an absolutely stunning book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It was good. The poems I understood, I really liked. There were no poems where I loved the whole thing, but there were plenty where I loved little sections of them. But there were quite a few of these that went over my head, just being honest. Like, I'm not an academic, I'm not, you know, like, there were just some poems where I was just like, I think I understand this, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, there were some really good lines in this. Let me find some that I highlighted. So we've got, "It says nobody knows where I lived for the first 3 months of my life. I say goblins. Poet ones who smoked cigarettes and had great taste in foundlings." And, like, you know, that's like a very simple little one, but I thought it was really lovely, and there were many more as well. I really enjoyed it. I would say if you already like poetry, I would recommend it. If you're getting into poetry, I gave it 4 stars. There's ones that I've rated 5 stars that I'd say to read first. Myself, I'm like, I know I like poetry. I'm not sure exactly what type and how to define and find the type of poems I read, but this was a solid enough read for me. But yeah. Then at 4.5 stars we have Legendary. This is the second book in the Caraval series. I can't tell you anything about it because it's the second book in a series, but I was really pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed it. I found that the way this book went was very different to how I expected, and how this book ended has made me extremely excited to pick up the final book of the series. So yeah, a really solid second book, especially, you know, a lot of second books or middle books in trilogies are the kind of letdown one. Like, this wasn't. This was really solid. It really stood its ground, and I was very happy reading it. Caraval, you basically have this magical circus museum event thing that pops up, and people go and they play the game of Caraval, and the winner gets a prize. It's very simple. How I would describe this series is, and this is YA, so it doesn't make perfect sense, but if you've ever been to Boomtown Festival, this series gives me the same vibe in terms of, like, the performers and the story and everything as what you get at Boomtown Festival. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to people who enjoy that, because I do think the vibes are pretty similar. So that was book 2. Then I read a book called Heavy is the Head. This was a e-art provided to me through NetGalley, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I really liked it. It was a really solid poetry collection. It was very strong, very powerful, really hit me. It was close to being a 5 stars, but it didn't quite get there for me personally, but there was a lot in it that I did really enjoy. Unfortunately, I find poetry, when I read them as e-books, they don't stick with me as much. This is definitely a book that's on my list to get a physical copy of, to be able to reread it and, like, highlight and make my own notes for it. But yeah, solid poetry collection. Would recommend. Will personally be rereading it to be able to get the most out of it, but that's just personal preference with how I read things. Then our first 5-star is honestly a bit of a cheat of a 5-star because this was a reread. Reread House of Earth and Blood. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. Essentially in January the third book of the series is coming out. I don't feel like I remember this well enough to jump into the third book, so what I am doing is that my library has the audiobooks of these, so I listened to the audiobook of the first one to kind of catch myself up, and I do feel better. I do feel more prepared to go into the third book having read that. I do remember a lot more now, and my hold has come in of the audiobook for the second one now, so honestly I'll probably get through that at some point during November, so expect that to be next month's wrap up. Honestly, I don't know what to say about this because although I recommend it and I really think you should read it, I think this should be the third series that you read. Sarah J Maas has 2 other series out, Throne of Glass and ACOTAR, and I definitely think that you should read both of those first and then jump into this one. And yeah, I had a good time with it, I had fun with it. If you already read the other series, I would definitely recommend picking it up. I think you'd enjoy it equally as much, if not more. Then a 4-star and a new series that I started was Illuminate. I was so pleasantly surprised by this. I had such a great time reading it. I wasn't sure what exactly to expect from the book because it is just, you know, like written in such an interesting way, but I had so much fun with it. I think it worked really well. I'm intrigued to pick up the second book in the series. However, except for like the very last chapter, well, it's not really a chapter, there's no chapters in this, but, you know, I'd say that is probably a chapter in a normal book. Like that last bit there, until we got to that point, this could have been a standalone, so I'm not entirely sure how sucked into the story I'm going to be when I do pick up the second book. But as a first book, it was really solid. I really enjoyed what it did. I thought it was very clever, and I thought the way it was written and the way that it helped you see what was going on in the way it was written, like just for instance, so I don't want to give anything away, but essentially there's points where maybe things aren't as linear and aren't as easy to follow, so they're like written like this, and I found that so clever and so much fun, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it wasn't a 5-star book, I gave it 4 stars, it was a solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I had so much fun reading it, and that was the main thing that I got out of this. It was fun to read. Then my audiobook hold for Celestial came back. Honestly, I gave this 3 stars, but I do feel like that's partly on me. I read 80% of the audiobook and then the audiobook was unavailable. So I've had to wait 6 to 8 weeks, I reckon it's been, and then I've read the last 20%, and I think because of that, my enjoyment of it was probably less. I still enjoyed it. It's the second book in a series, and we follow characters that we met in the first book in the series, but it's many years later. And it was good. I thought it was really solid. It was really interesting. The only negative of the book for me was that it set up a plot for book 3 that's based around a trope that I really hate. So like reading this book and knowing what it was setting up for the next book, it was like, oh, so even if I love this book, I know I'm not going to have the best of times with the next one, sort of thing. But honestly, it was a really solid book. Essentially angels in training, I guess is the easiest way to say it, and it's following their lives of maybe ones that don't quite agree with all the rules and how they're set up, but yeah, it was fun. Then there's a whole video on A Wizard's Guide to Baking. I will link it up above. I gave it 2.5 stars in the end. This was a book club pick for Heather and Jay's novel Encounters, and yeah, it was fun. It was okay. I go into my full thoughts in that video. Essentially, I think it's been marketed badly. I didn't get from the book what I thought I would be getting going into it, and I think if it had been marketed differently, I either would have expected different or not picked it up. It was fine. I can definitely see why people would enjoy this book, but personally, it wasn't for me. Then we started another video. If you want my full thoughts to the next book, there will be in a video linked up here, and that was a video where I read BookTube's Autumnal Book Recs. The first book I read for that video was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. The fact that I now own a physical copy should tell you I really did enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars, it was solid, and this seems like it's kind of, it's a standalone book, but the author is also coming out with other books that seem like a similar vibe. I am expecting they're probably in the same world. I don't know if we'll see characters from this one. Like, I don't know if they are true standalones or if they're companion novels, but either way, I'm excited to pick up more. And yeah, this was fun, right? I need everyone to know there's a dog in this book. I don't know why that's not advertised. For me, I didn't pick this up on my own merit. I picked it up because it was recommended for that video. And personally for me, when I hear about a witch teaching children, it didn't sound good. But honestly, knowing that there was a dog and like a dog as like, you know, the witch's main companion, it could have swayed me to pick it up by myself. So if that is you, you should know there is a dog in this book. But yeah, it was a really fun time. I gave such in-depth thoughts in that video. I think I even ended up doing a spoiler section for it because I just got so into it. I think it's fun. I think it's a little bit silly, a little bit daft. But overall, it was fun and heartwarming, and you really felt the different characters, and every character, even like side characters or smaller characters, had their part, and you could really understand who they are and what was going on and what was happening. And yeah, the children in this didn't even annoy me, so I was really pleasantly surprised by it. Then next I read Starlight. That was the final book in the same series as Celestial, and I gave it 3 stars. I knew going into it I wasn't going to love it because I knew the tropes going in. I do think this is a really solid series overall. There's 3 books in it, it's a trilogy, and I do think that how this book ended was a really good way to end the series. I thought it wrapped things together very well. It was very fun. And honestly, I just think, even though I didn't love the book because I don't love the trope, it was a very solid book and a very solid ending to the series, so I'd still recommend it. Like, I know that 3 stars doesn't sound like an amazing recommendation, but I think a lot of that 3 stars is based off the tropes in it, and that's personal preference. So yeah, if you're intrigued by the series, if you're intrigued by these like angels in training who have to earn their feathers and don't technically like the rules and not really sure what's going on, then I would definitely recommend it. It's like a fantasy paranormal romance book, I'd say. I'd say all of them are mainly plot, but the romance is normally a focus of the plot. So yeah. Then in the same video as the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I also read A Diary of Blood. Unfortunately, I only gave this 3.5 stars. It wasn't for me, and I think that was mainly the writing, but also the characters. I didn't like or connect to any of the characters, and the way it's written, this book, you are reading from the present, and it's like letters being written about what happened in the past. So at the start of the book, you know what's happened and what's gone on, and I essentially think this would have been better as like a novella. The last 14% I feel like did so much, but the last 14% was what I was expecting to happen much earlier on. It was just a very slow lyrical writing style, and the story meandered, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. It was too slow paced, I think, is the main thing, and I also just didn't like any of the characters or anything. But yeah, the last 14% was great. I think I'd have preferred it as a novella. It was fine. I can see why people like it, just not my personal preference. And if you want full thoughts, you can check out that video. And then also in that video I read The Hacienda, which I also gave 3.5 stars. I'm really struggling to find historical that isn't fantasy that I like, and even some historical fantasy I'm like, oh, maybe not. But yeah, this was interesting. It's marketed as horror. Personally, I wasn't scared. It didn't get me. There was only like 2 or 3 points throughout the whole book that made me feel like a bit creepy. So it just wasn't for me. It didn't work. And it's weird. I don't read much horror. This is like probably the, well, I know it's the 12th horror book that I've read in like the last 3 years, so like I don't read a lot of horror. But I think horror is difficult because you have like your character preference, your writing preference, which you have for the rest of the things, but also then you have how easily scared you are. Like for me, getting into horror books, you want to be scared. Like that's the point of reading it. It's horror, I want to be scared. That's not the case for everyone, so there's that. And also everyone's like scare level is different, so I don't know how to recommend this book, who to recommend it to, who it would fit, who it wouldn't. If you want my full thoughts, check out that video. But essentially the horror in it and the like scare type, the scare element, didn't work for me. Then I read a fun one. I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I really did enjoy it overall. I don't want to be nitpicky. There were 2 or 3 things in there that I was just like, ah, come on. But I do think it was more the time period it was set and not completely understanding characters. And then there was one thing that I didn't like in there, which honestly, even if that by itself was in there, I don't think I would have given it 5 stars. And it was like a stylistic writing choice that happened for 2 or 3 chapters of the book. And personally, it just wasn't for me. It was... So I don't want to spoil anything, so I can't tell you what happened, but essentially there's a section of 2 or 3 chapters together that I personally felt would have read much better and been better for me if we had another perspective. Yeah, so that's all I can really say. I think it was a stylistic choice. Like, it wasn't bad, it just didn't work for me, but 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun. Again, another dog. We have another dog sidekick, but I think it's called like a hound something, but it's essentially a dog. And yeah, it's fun. There's fairies. I really liked one of the fairies that like we met very early on. They really had a distinct personality. We got to see a lot of exploration, a lot of things going on around the world, and I feel like the characters and the setting were very strong points in this. So I would really recommend it. I think it was a good like autumnal book, to be honest. Like, I had a very fun time with it. Then we have a poetry collection that I read called Electric Arches, which again I gave 4 stars. It was a collection that I enjoyed. It was a collection that I saw a lot in, and there was a lot of things that were like hard hitting, but not everything worked for me, which is why I got 4 stars. But there was so much in here that did. So for instance, this is about sex education at school, and it says, at school I learned that my body was a worksheet full of blank spaces and mysterious and menacing forms, and the best I could hope was that someone more knowledgeable than I would know what to do with them. Like, I don't know, like, I do think it really interesting. It had a lot of points. Like, a lot of it was about like the experience of being black and growing up black. A lot of it was experience of growing up in America. A lot of it was just the experience of being a woman, and a lot of it was all those things bundled together. It was really good. It was really hard hitting. I would definitely recommend it if you're in the right headspace. It does get heavy, but like not heavy in a way that I think should be negatively looked at. Just look after yourself when you're reading, sort of thing. If you're in a bad headspace, maybe give it a miss for a little bit and then pick it up. But it's something that I do think needs to be read and needs to be understood, so I would definitely recommend it, and definitely think. Okay, my camera ran out of storage and now the battery's flashing, so I'm going to try and be quick so I don't have to continue this later. But essentially I would really recommend it. I do think it's important to read, and I do think there are a lot of messages and a lot of things in this that maybe honestly, if you okay, the lighting's probably changed. Turned out my battery did die. Basically what I was saying about this is, if you're already seeking out this content, you're probably not the people that need to hear it, but I still think it's done in such a way that even if you're aware of the realities of the world, like, it's still very impactful and powerful, so I would still recommend it. Then I picked up and read Powerless. This was good. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was solid. Look, if I'm being honest, I think 4 stars was a bit generous for this, but like, it feels like it was worth the 4 stars. I don't know how to describe it. Essentially, I think it's probably closer to a 3.5 stars, or maybe even personally for me a 3 stars, but that's just because, one, it's young adult. It, you know, wasn't difficult to figure out what's going on. It's pretty obvious what's going on the whole time. 2, there were definitely some things in this that were very easily took inspiration from other books. There were 2 or 3 moments in here where I personally think if you'd read this book and read the Hunger Games and like you blocked out the place names and the character names and read the sentence, you wouldn't know which book it came from. Specifically the announcement of the trials. So similar, so it was just a little bit cheesy, a little bit over the top in that sense, but I think it's a really solid start. It's a debut book and I had fun with it. Like, even though I don't think like idea wise it was as like unique as a lot of the books that I do tend to read, and it was, you know, easy to follow, easy to guess what was going to happen, I still feel like there was enough going on. Okay, I think the best way to word this is young adult. If I'd have read this as a young adult before I'd read all the current young adult books that were like when I was growing up, this would be amazing. So I think it's worth the 4 stars. Like, for me, I'm sure if I reread now the books that I was reading 10, 15 years ago, I'm sure I'd feel the same way about them as I do this. So it is 4 stars. It was solid. It was really good. Yeah, I think it's good. I think if you've read too much young adult, it might be a bit basic, but it was still good. I still had a fun time. I think I will definitely continue on with the series. I definitely want to, I don't know how many books is meant to be in this series. I'll definitely read the next book. Like the way this ended, I'll definitely read the next book in the series and we'll go from there. And then the last physical book that I read, there are still 2 more Kindle books, but the last physical book that I read was Fourth Wing. Yeah, I read it. I give it 4 stars. It was solid enough. It was fine enough. I do think it's overhyped. And especially with what I'd heard about the book and like the tropes and the things in it, some of those things were a bit of a letdown from what people are hyping them up to be. And I'm not gonna, you know, lie about that. Like, they were. I think it's a solid 4-star read. I definitely want to continue on with the series. I think it's very interesting. I saw all of the twists and turns coming throughout it, but not the reasons behind them. There were stuff going on that, like, you know, was interesting and was interesting to learn about. This is a solid new adult fantasy romance, and it's got dragons. We get to see quite a bit of the dragons. That was really good. And I'm pretty sure that I thought this meant to be a 5-book series, which makes me feel like this is just kind of the setup. So I'm intrigued to continue. I think it was good. I've given it 4 stars. I understand why so many people are liking it, but there's a lot else out there as well. If you have read Fourth Wing and enjoyed it, maybe have a little bit of a search for other books. I think I might even do a video at some point, like, because Fourth Wing is so hyped, but I think there's so many books that I've personally read that, like, you know, did the things that people are loving, not necessarily better, but just in a way that I personally more enjoyed. I might do a whole video, but yeah, 4 stars. I did enjoy it. I would recommend it to like anyone. I think that is one of the things. A lot of the fantasy books I read, I wouldn't recommend them to anyone, whereas I feel like anywhere that you are in your fantasy reading journey, you could pick this up and enjoy it. Then I read Reign of Shadows and Endings. I gave it 4 stars, but honestly I think I might have even been a little harsh. I think this is maybe 4.5. I don't know. Honestly, it's my favourite book I've read this month. So yeah, essentially you've probably heard me talk about the Lady of Darkness series at some point or another. It's a series that I've read this year. This is a book by the same author, and essentially the books that the author is putting out, even when they're different series, they are somehow connected. I would recommend reading Lady of Darkness and that whole series first before picking this one up. You can read this first, you can start with this series, no problem at all, you will understand it completely. But if you were to read this book, even like, you know, I've only read the first book, and then go back and read Lady of Darkness, a lot of the reveals wouldn't be as revealing, because some of the things that are in that world that are confusing, that aren't understood, that need research doing to them, that you learn throughout the series, in this world, in this book here, in the Reign of Shadows and Endings, they're just standard parts of it, so like you learn about it very quickly. So if you are going to pick these up, 100% Lady of Darkness first. It's absolutely amazing. It's like battling for the top of the year right now, so yeah, absolutely amazing, would recommend. This didn't catch me as easily as Lady of Darkness. Like, I'm not initially pulled in, like I'm not like, do you know what, no, like I do really want to pick up the second book, but I think it took a long part of the story. I really want to pick up the second book because of how this book ended. You know, I haven't 100% connected to any of the characters or the world yet, whereas at the end of the first book in the other series I was completely connected. But honestly, that's just like a character basis really, isn't it? So very excited, very intrigued, really want to read more. I don't think the next book comes out till like April, so I'm waiting. I really enjoyed it. I'd really recommend it. It's a fantasy romance. I don't want to tell you anything else because I really do recommend reading A Lady of Darkness first before this. And although I don't feel like anything in the synopsis would give it away, I don't want to risk that. It's a fun book. It's good. There's lots of things going on. Read Lady of Darkness first if you'd like to pick it up. And then the last book I read of the month was called The Umbra King. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It was alright. It feels like it should have been a standalone. There was a lot of fluff, and I'm not really a fluff person. Let's put it like that. Like, there was a lot of just like mundane, easy scenes. There was a lot of faffing about. It is a duology. I am picking up the second book in it. I'm going to finish it because it is just a duology, but I definitely feel like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a complete story just reading the first book, like, which makes me feel like probably could have just been one book rather than over the two, but I guess I can tell you my full thoughts on that next month once I've read the second book as well. But as of right now, I feel like it should have been a standalone and it should have been compiled. We will wait and see and guess. But yeah, that is all the books that I read during October. I really do hope that you enjoyed the video. Sorry it's been choppy. Hopefully it doesn't look too different, but it very well could. And yeah, that's everything from me. That's all the books I read in October. Let me know how you did in October. What was your reading like? Honestly, October is normally my best reading month of the year. It's actually not this year. There was one month that I did better. I don't know why. I don't know. We'll analyse that at the end of the year and we go over all of the reading stats. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Really had fun. Feel like I read a lot of solid books, even though none of them I don't think I knew 100% favourites. I feel like there was a lot of start of series that I read where like the series themselves could become favourites. So yeah, I'm really excited. Do hope you enjoyed the video. Please do give it a like if you liked it, subscribe down below if you'd like to see more content like this, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.